many non-IP uses for patent prior art studies. Hello and welcome back to Invent Anything. Patent prior art studies play a vital role in business, market, product, and technology strategies. And that's would probably feel like a surprise, I bet, to people that do prior art studies. But it allows us to take a look at the intellectual property protection, of course, but it also allows companies to do things like risk assessment, business valuation, competitive positioning, first mover advantage, licensing trends, performance improvements, regulatory compliance, you name it. So stay tuned as we talk about the many non-IP uses for patent prior art studies. This is John Cronin.
Inventions keep the world spinning. From fire and the wheel to today's high tech, inventions power change. Turn your inventions into reality. Learn how to get your ideas to market. This is Invent Anything with John Cronin.
And today we'll talk about 6 top topics. The first topic is, what is a patent prior art study? This will give us some grounding for those that might not know the details of it. Then we'll talk in topic number 2 about the business uses for patent prior art studies, hitting it at the highest level. How does patent prior art studies impact your business? In topic number 3, we'll talk about the market uses for patent prior art studies, and then move into topic number 4, which is the product uses for patent prior art studies. And then we'll move into topic number 5, which is sort of the technology uses for patent prior art studies. And then we'll wrap up with topic number 6, talk about the future uses for patent prior art studies. And this is a big one because there's a lot of energy and activity by a lot of companies trying to figure out other uses for the corpuses of information for patent prior art. I chose these different topics so that we could see the difference between how patent prior arts does for non-IP uses, because anybody that has a patent prior art study or wants to consider doing one might not understand that they can use it for so many other things. And then, of course, we'll wrap up. And thinking about the audience here, it's a little bit varied. I think, obviously, anybody that's interested in patent prior art studies, this is definitely for you. But I really built this podcast for those sort of small companies who want to leverage patent prior art studies by using it for other uses as well, reducing the cost of an overall patent prior art study. I also thought for larger companies to get sort of enhanced value out of the patent prior art studies they do lots of them, but they probably don't know of all these other uses. One of the things is that for those investors or board members of small companies that don't know the many value uses of patent prior art studies, this is for you, because sometimes, advising their companies on expenses for patents might be sometimes restrictive, but this sort of opens up the sort of reason for doing a patent prior art study for the many other uses. And I built this podcast for those folks that might want to understand the connection between patent prior art studies and everything around the business, market, product, or technologies of the company. And finally, as in many of the podcasts we've been doing, we've been looking at AI and the future of AI for any of these topics. And patent prior art studies is right down the bowling alley for the use of AI. So coming up in the next section, we'll dive into the critical role of patent prior art studies, how to verify novelty and patentability, how to refine claims, strengthen intellectual property. But then we'll explore the business use for prior arts, like freedom to operate. How do you defend against litigation? How do you gain competitive positioning? How do you build opposition strategies? And even about licensing and valuation. So stay tuned. So let's get right into it. Let's go to topic number 1. What is a patent prior art study? Now, I got to say that if you're a patent attorney or patent agent or patent engineer in a company, you probably know most of this for sure. It might be good as a little review. But there's so many people that are doing patent prior art studies for the first time. We have many, many early stage clients in my consulting firm, IP Capital, and we have thousands of folks we've been working with over the 26, 27 years. Even large companies, the people we work with, the inventors and the managers don't understand patent prior art studies. So I'll get into it at a high level, but this is really an overview for those who know it, but for those who don't know it, I think this will be very interesting. So one of the things about patent prior art studies is that you are hoping to get a patent. And so you look at the invention that you've documented or about to document, and ask yourself the question, is there any prior art in the literature, anything published? And if it's published and it's related, then you need to see the overlap between your invention and the published art. Usually you need a lot of skill to do that. Usually a patent attorney or patent agent or expert consultant can help you there. But one of the things about patent prior art studies is that you want to see how novel your invention is. That's called novel verification. So this ensures that if you're going to file your invention, look at the prior art, you understand the existing prior art to understand how novel your invention really is over that prior art. And it isn't just a yes or no answer. It could be, at the end of the day, either yes or no, but there's gradations to that. The next thing is patentability assessment, where you determine whether the invention meets the legal requirements of obtaining a patent. Because if there is an overlap, the next step is the overlap considered by somebody of normal skill in the art. So there's another level to this sort of novelty. One of the things this leads to is the third point about claim refinement. Whatever your invention is, when you look at the patent prior art, you might refine your invention to be more limiting or different. Therefore, you might change the claim structure, change the claim language around what your invention should be because you reviewed the patent prior art. One of the things about patent prior art is it's great for litigation defense. So if you uncover prior art while you're looking at, say, an invention, you could challenge the validity of that patent through prior art and therefore maybe get a patent invalidated. So one of the great uses of prior art studies is for litigation defense. Another use for patent prior art studies is portfolio strengthening. You see, when you assess your portfolio and look at the prior art related to your portfolio, you'll see various white spaces, opportunities to invent. You'll see overlaps where there could be competitive threats, and you'll even see differences where the competitors are different than you. So this patenting positioning is really important for strengthening your portfolio. Another thing is that you can take a look at technology trends with patent prior art, meaning when you look at prior art over a period of time, you can see how the art has been changing, how it's been improving the invention space, how it's improving the benefits or features of a product or a service. So a great thing about patent prior art studies, say if you did it over 10, 15 years, looking backwards up to today, you'll see the technology trends. One of the things about the patent prior art studies is that it's great for use as what's called an opposition strategy, meaning it provides insight to you about the prior art of somebody else's potential patent. So you can use that to oppose that patent and basically maybe eliminate a patent from issuing that you might be worried about. And one of the final things about patent prior art is you can certainly use it for licensing and valuation. See, if there's a lot of prior art, then that means your claims are going to be probably more narrowed, which means that there's less ability for you to get a lot more value out of it. However, if there's less prior art and you have really much broader claims, then you have the ability to have a higher value likely for your patent. So basically, the more prior art, the worse it is for your licensing possibilities of valuation. The less prior art, the more ability for most people on the other side of the negotiations to see how really novel and different you are. Now, there are people that make a living out of patent prior art, and I'm just trying to cover it here in about 5 minutes. But I really want to give you a high level of the patent prior art. It's a study done usually by patent prior art professionals, of which there are a lot of them, to take a look at your invention or the patent in question and to say, is the prior art overlapping this potential invention or this patent that's issued? And from that, make some opinions that then could drive the business decisions of whether you want to get a patent and or whether or not you want to invalidate a patent. Now, note one other thing is that this goes in front of the examiner, because any patent prior art you study for the understanding of whether you should get patent claims or not of your invention should be mentioned in the patent, because you have a duty of obligation to tell the examiner the patent prior art that you found. Keep in mind that if you don't do a patent prior art study, which you're not required to, the examiner will, by definition, there are statutory requirements that they have to look at the prior art of at least their patent office, 2 other patent offices, and 1 outside reference. So no matter what, the examiner will look at the prior art. And I always suggest that you look at the patent prior art. It sometimes save you a lot of money by not going forward with a patent if you find a lot of patent prior art. Let's go on to the next topic, topic number 2. This is where we're going to shift now and talk about things that are non-patent uses for the patent prior art studies. Seems kind of weird, right? A patent prior art study, but there's non-patent uses. Well, let's get into it. One of the first things about business uses uh, uh, for non-IP uses for patent prior art is business risk assessment. You see, when you're looking at the patent prior art of a space, you can evaluate how many players there are. And you can start thinking about if there's a lot of players in the space and they're aggressive, then that adds some business risk. So one thing right off the bat is a patent prior art study can tell you about business risk. It also could tell you about how you might fortify your business and strengthen it. Because when you look at your patent prior art, you're going to see gaps where maybe somebody else is not. And that might be where you want to go. So you can strengthen your business. One of the great things about patent prior art studies, it helps you understand the valuation of your company. Because if there's not a lot of patent prior art, that shows that you have a free and clear path for your business, which gives it more ability in the market to succeed, more ability and less risk. So the valuation is higher. But when there's a lot of patent prior art, especially with other companies that assert their patents, that's going to add not a lot of risk, but it's going to probably lower the value of the direction of your business. One of the things about the patent prior art is it helps businesses position their novelty. A lot of times when a business is trying to say what's very different about them, when they're trying to raise money, for instance, what's different about them? A patent prior art study over the inventions of your company versus the patent prior art can help you really understand the novelty. From that, the next step would be that another business value for the patent prior art study is that maybe you could find a first mover advantage in this. Many times when you don't see a lot of prior art, this might give you insights as to this is a direction the company should head for first mover. I've seen this many times with early stage companies. As we show them the patent prior art, they were surprised that there was no prior art. And therefore it energizes them to say, this is a direction that we definitely should go through. Maybe they were questioning it, but maybe now with the patent prior art study showing an open space, they can go forward with it. One of the things about the patent prior art for business is that it helps you see the competitive landscape. There's nothing better than searching your business competitors, and you can look at all sorts of things on the web, reports, etc. But the patent literature is very different. It's extremely unique. It takes a lot of money to get a patent, and it tells you about novelty of the technology. So a patent prior art study is wonderful to give you a competitive technology landscape. So I'd really consider doing a patent prior art study, even if you're not going for patents right away. You'll actually start seeing the differences in the technology. Another use for the business is an investment strategy. So it helps guide, where you're going to apply capital. If you have 3 or 4 different areas to move your inventions and product and technology in, patent prior art studies can help that a lot. One of the things about the business is you can learn a lot from the patent prior art about how others are trying to solve the same problems and giving you ideas about how others are being more efficient or having better problems being solved. So it's a way of helping you be more efficient. And many times, I could tell you that the patent prior art study is sort of an input to the R&D to avoid a lot of costs to see what everybody else have done. One of the cool things about patent prior art from the business perspective as well is it shows you the other companies you might find prior art that you don't necessarily have to worry about because you're not overlapping it, but you could see a partnership arrangement. And so many times when we show patent prior art studies, we're finding new partners to call, to maybe have vendors or suppliers, or even new customers, which is the last point, is that one of the things that businesses can use the patent prior art for is to find new customers, actually to help you grow your business and plan it. So these are just some of the areas that the business can use to use the patent prior art studies, non-IP uses of the patent prior art studies. Well, look, we're going to come up with in our next section of how we're going to look at prior art studies and how they're going to shape the market and product strategies. From the market perspective, we're going to look at the ability to see industry trends, potential customers. We're going to see how companies can assess key claim types and market entry. We're also going to start looking at the market more specifically, looking at maybe licensing opportunities, partnership. We're going to take a look at how you can predict where products are headed, and therefore where the products could be developed, and help you kind of grow and drive your business. So stay tuned, because patent prior art studies can be very useful for the market and the product. So topic number 3, we want to talk about the market uses for a patent prior art study. One of the earliest indications that I've seen in using patent prior art studies and talking to the market is that we can see competitors. How many competitors? Let's say that you find one competitor that has 20 different patent prior arts and another one that has one. Well, this tells us that some companies are very interested in patenting, but they may be very interested in protecting the market space. If you have just universities, for instance, or individual inventors in your patent prior art study, that might give you more feeling that you have more potential to win in the market with less competition. So it certainly can help identify market competitors. Another area for market is to understand the drivers and the benefits. I could do a whole podcast on this, honestly. Basically, when you look at a patent, it solves a problem. And when you look at that problem that it solves with the new invention, that then creates another problem to be solved. And so one can kind of string together the prior art to see the evolution of the drivers of the business space or of the market, where the inventions are the benefits to solve, but they themselves will then have new drivers to consider. So looking at sort of the drivers and the benefits of the patent prior art study for the market gives you a wonderful way for understanding the innovation of the industry. Another thing that kind of interesting that the patent prior art studies give us sort of the market potential customers. They can help you analyze who might be good customers. A lot of times when you do patent prior art studies, you're not exactly finding your prior art, but you're finding how others are using the prior art that you're interested in, and those become customers. So you can kind of use this to try to find potential customers. Another thing, which is a kind of related to patent prior art studies, but one of the parameters of a patent prior art study, more than just analyzing the claims and look at the competitors' names and how many, is to look at citations. See, when a patent is filed, the prior art to the patent is referenced in the patent. That's called a citation. And the references either come from you, the person applying for the patent, or from the examiner. I can guarantee you most patents that are issued always have cited art by the examiner. And the examiner has no dog in the fight. The examiner is not part of your business. The examiner is strictly looking at the novelty of your invention and citing the closest reference art. Well, many times you can look at the patent prior art and see some patents that are heavily cited. As a matter of fact, citations is one of the ways to understand the value of a patent. If you have a patent that's cited thousands of times, that's much more valuable than a patent that's cited once or none at all. Many years when I worked at IBM, I knew of the most cited patent in the world that IBM owned. And that was hugely valuable in our licensing negotiations. One of the things about patent prior art studies for the market is that it'll help you and the patent attorney identify the best way to claim your patent. It's called key claim types. You can see the artist of the patent attorneys and how they're claiming the subject matter and learn from that in order to claim your subject matter. It's a wonderful way of sort of getting an advanced look at the claim types that are being allowed. Another thing about the market is that it shows you the barriers for entry. In other words, when you're assessing the level of the patent saturation, and then you start to recognize how many patent prior arts there are, it might show you that if there's a lot of entries in the market that have patents, then there's a bigger barrier for entry. Well, the key things about the market thinking when you look at a patent prior art is it shows you lots of possibilities for licensing and partnerships. If you have a really good patent portfolio in a space and you look at the patent prior art to it, especially those that build on your inventions, that cite you, these become great targets for partners or licenses. Another thing about the patent prior art study for markets is it shows you growth. We many times look at maybe different technology areas that a company's in and look at the patent prior art studies. And maybe in one area of technology, the growth rate of patents is 10x. In another area, it's 1x or 2x in growth. So what we found is that the patent prior arts help us do some trend analysis for the market. Definitely something that you should sort of think about. And you can start moving from a sort of patent prior art study to what's called an IP landscape. We have a podcast on the IP landscape process, which is a systemized way of looking at the patent prior art in a graphical way. Another thing about the patent prior art is it helps with market white space analysis. That is to say, if there's a lot of patents, it's going to be hard to maneuver. If there's not a lot of patents, it'd be a white space. So it helps you understand the market white space and where to move into the market. And finally, one of the things about the patent prior art study relative to the market is it tells you about maturity. Yes, we're talking about sort of the numbers of patents and the growth rate of patents. That certainly gives you kind of a trend. But you can actually look at the patent prior art and see how the technology is really different than yours. If your technology is a lot like everybody else's technology, chances are you're in a mature market. If your technology and your potential invention is so different than everybody else's, that should give you a great indication of how different you are. Well, let's move on and talk about the product. Now, sort of the market is, where you can sell your product, but the product is getting down to exactly what your product is. And your product has underneath it, which we'll talk about next in technology. But from the product perspective, or service, you have a lot of components to your products. So many times people will file patents on an apparatus or a system, etc., manufacturing plant, all the things that come together for a final product. So when I look at this types of patents for prior arts, there's a lot of different uses for the results about how you position or develop your product. So in one case, product drivers comes right out of the patent prior art study. You can actually see what others are talking about in their patents as the need for the product. You'll see a lot in the patent literature, this phrase, thus there exists a need for. It's in the sort of problem and definition section of the patent. So the patent prior art is great because it's telling you what others think is the needs for the market. Therefore, that will help you with your product direction. One of the great things about the patent prior art is if you look at it over time, you'll see some patent on a product, and then you'll see another patent improving that product, etc. So by looking at this over time, you can see a sort of a product improvement direction. I have found that any good technical and product people reading patent prior art always sees flaws and then come away with all sorts of improvements for their own product. So it's actually a wonderful brainstorming tool. Another thing about the product area for patent prior art is it helps you see product integration, meaning you could take a look at your patented technology and connect it with others to maybe enhance a system or a value chain. So this allows you to improve your product integration. Well, the absolute keys to the patent prior art when you look at the product side is the leveraging points. One of the great things about patents is it highlights the differences and the value of those differences. So when you look at the prior art, you can see what others think are the differences and the value of those differences. Therefore, you get a much better indication of the value of your invention than your differences and the values of those differences. I mentioned before in the market that you can see trends. You can do the same thing for the product. You can kind of line up the patent literature for the prior art and look at product trends, meaning that what was actually in the product that was useful in differentiating it. So these trends are very important. And beneath the product trends are what's called product features. And the neat thing about patents is you get to see the features as well as the product. A feature being something like its higher speed or lower costs and things like that. So you can then see from the patent prior art other products and what they think the features are. One of the great things is that some patents actually talk about how to improve things and make it more manufacturable, make it more efficient, make it more repeatable. And the patent prior art is great for product improvement. As a matter of fact, the patent prior art is very different between countries like this. So in Japan, the Kokai, which is a Japanese patent literature, is totally almost focused on the improvements of products. Where in the US, you might find less percentage of just improving things, rather showing brand new products. But whether it's the Kokai of the Japanese patent office or the US or some other patent office, clearly you can get to see this sort of trend towards improvement and product enhancement. One of the things about the product area is regulatory areas. A lot of times when you review the prior art, you can see if you're in an industry where there are regulations that bar you or that you're restricted to, a lot of patents cover, regulations and compliance and things like that. If you go into the cell phone space, for instance, 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G, all that stuff, what you'll find out is you need to comply with the standard. So there's thousands of patents written on how you can create an invention that can get you into the standards. So if you're into an area of compliance for your products, the patent prior art literature is extremely useful to help you understand this. We've all heard this word, the sort of product life cycle, right? How things move from sort of new and getting into the product, and then it's sort of evolving, and then it matures, and then it changes again. You add features, and then all of a sudden you need a new product, and you're on the S curve, where you go from just defining it to improving it to becoming mature, and you jump on the next S curve. Well, you could see that when you look at the patent prior art. Now, when you look at the patent prior art to do work like this, you just can't look at 3 patent prior arts. You got to be looking at dozens of them. And I used to do this as an inventor all the time. I would literally get a conference table and lay out, say, 10 years worth of patents, maybe put 4 or 5 patents, in one year, and then the next couple of patents in the next year, et cetera, and lay them out the conference table and just go from one end to the other, reading them quickly to get the sense of this sort of life cycle. Today, with the tools that you have available, you can actually do this graphically more easily. But still, the idea holds that you can see the life cycle of the product. And maybe you're in the middle of the life cycle, and the patent prior art can teach you towards the end of the cycle of related products in your space. And finally, the patent literature, patent prior art studies can tell you a lot about product differentiation. A lot of the attributes of patents are clearly the differences of the patents of one patent over another. So understanding how to differentiate a product becomes much clearer when you look at the patent prior art. Now, I know in talking about some of the stuff between the product and market, it may seem somewhat of an overlap, and it is, because this is subjectively thinking. But also, if you listen kind of clearly of these different areas, some of these are just studies into themselves that gives you a lot of product insight. Well, the next section coming up is we're going to talk about how the patent prior art studies influence technology development. Then we're going to talk about future innovations, how we can discover how technology variations allow you to have multiple approaches. We're going to talk about how to project technology. We're going to talk about how you can leverage and scale technology. Then after we do that, we're going to then talk about the future of this, where all of a sudden artificial intelligence is going to help us, talk about how we can sort of look at the wonderful changes of, how AI and patent prior art studies can help us to understand the future of our world and how we could shape that future. So coming up in the next section, last section, we're going to talk about patent prior art studies influencing 2 things. One is technology development, and the other is the future of this. So in technology development, we're going to talk about how patent prior art studies can help us project technology space, how it can show us how to improve and scale it, how we can see the gaps, how we can see how we converge in technology areas. We're going to talk about how to do standardizations. Now I'm going to switch over for the last topic about the future of this. AI-driven insights will come from patent prior art studies. We'll be able to do predictive filings, cross-industry discovery, automatic licensing intelligence. So stay tuned, because we're going to do a dive into this sort of patented technology and how it influences technology, and also the future of this whole patent prior art space. So in topic number 5, we're going to talk about the technology uses for patent prior art. So we've talked about the business, we've talked about the market, we talked about the product. The next layer down is the actual technology. One would think this is what the patent non-prior art is all about. And you're right that a lot of times looking at the patent prior art, you're actually trying to see how different your technology is from everybody else's. So obviously there's a very strong influence here, but there's some nice insights. So one thing is you can get to see technology variations from the patent prior art. You can identify how your technology is versus how other people have done different technologies. For instance, if there's a way to sort of aerate, ice cream, you might find that someone's doing it with a high speed mixer. You might find somebody else using some sort of high injection airstream. 2 different technologies, right? So you can start to see technology variations, and that's really useful for an inventor. But you can at least, from a patent prior art study, seeing how close your invention technology is to somebody else's, you're going to see a lot of variations. You're also going to see projections. You're going to see how others are taking that next step for technology that you might not be. So for instance, you could be thinking about how to, build some sort of new blockchain technology, and you could find out that somebody else is now using large language models to create the blockchains. A real, very different way of looking at the technology. So it helps with technology projections. One of the things is that comes right out of the patent prior art is technology improvements, because it shows you the refinements and improvements that are being made. If I go back to that blender, you might see that, I have some inventions on how high speed I can make the blender of ice cream, but then some people might be improving it by changing the blade shape of the blender. Some people can go further and start to say, I need to optically take a look at how that's working and add some lighting technology to the blender blades so they can actually see it moving and have a camera take an image of it as it's moving to actually have it to be very steady in its variation. I mean, so you can go from one invention to the next, seeing this sort of technology improvement. Another thing about technology improvement, it moves to the next thing, which is sort of technology layering, which shows how the innovations build on each other. How sort of one technology, stopped and another one started, so they're building on top of each other. One of the great things about a patent prior art study is to show gaps between, patents. So all of a sudden you'll see, say in some sort of automotive feature like a headlight, all of a sudden you're seeing lots of headlights and special lenses for headlights. And now you're seeing improvements. But all of a sudden you don't see much. And then all of a sudden you start to see micro LED technology. And it just jumps on the scene as a new way of designing a headlight. So it sort of like shows that there was a gap. The refinement stopped and in came a new technology. On the other hand, different other things occur, like sort of technology convergence. So, let's just say that you're thinking about stereos and you see lots of intellectual property on how to make the audio stereo sound better and how to make it at lower power, for instance. But all of a sudden you see some other digital electronics coming in with this sort of frequency analyzers used for signal processing. But now you see all of a sudden frequency analyzing and signal processing coming into the stereo to do some fast Fourier transforms to improve the sound using a math function, not just analog computers. So you could see technology convergence. Another thing is you can see technology scalability. This is important. So let's just say that, you're making, buildings, and all of a sudden someone comes up with a way of, and I have clients like this with 3D printing of buildings. And then all of a sudden they built one or two, and they got a patent on the way to do that. But now this needs to come in to full-time, as a business. We need to make thousands and thousands of houses using 3D printing. So what's the inventions there? And then you find out that a big part of the inventions have to do with how do you get the 3D printer on site and how do you keep moving it? So you can start to see this sort of scalability. One of the great things about patent prior art, it actually shows you how you get efficiency gains. This is so, vogue in the energy space. How you're trying to get energy enhancements, how you're trying to save energy, save costs for energy. Now, for instance, we're using high technology to look at energy, thermal energy, and using sort of all sorts of mathematical algorithms to project, thermal energy loss and how to have a control system to come back and maintain that energy loss. One of the interesting things about the patent prior art is it also shows how technology is coming together, how you're integrating it. So the more than convergence, how two things are coming together. This is integration. Go back to my stereo with the fast Fourier transform. That would be convergence. But now that stereo is going to be integrated into how you're going to actually produce the music. So now maybe I'll be having guitars or pianos that have these synthesizers built in, so the stereo system could take advantage to that, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, the opposite of this integration and standardization is that once you get something to the place that it's kind of fully integrated, the thing is then how do you roll this thing out so that everybody can participate in it and everybody can build these products to lower the cost? And that's where standardization comes in. What are the standards? We talked about things like 5G and 4G, et cetera, for standardization, how the patent prior art helps us there. But the patent prior art can also start showing you where standards are starting to appear. You might find companies, for instance, that have patents that are only related to the standards. And maybe they created the standard and their patents were the first to create the standard. So now their patents will be used in a reasonable and non-discriminatory license for anybody else that wants to use the standard. So overlapping the patent prior art as a way to understand standardization is a really useful tool. Well, we're going to move from the technology now to what I call the fun part, actually, the future of patent prior art studies. We're in a world where almost every day AI is getting better and better. Large language models, and now chips that do large language models. And now, GANs, generative networks that have two language models talking to each other, one asking questions and the other answering it, going around and around to do it in parallel and better. So AI is just at the beginning. One of my clients the other day described AI. He said he was a really good programmer, but with AI, he's a super programmer. And he says it's kind of like being a scientist, but then being Tony Stark with the Iron Man suit, that you could turn into, the average warrior could turn into a super warrior with this suit on. And he felt that AI was like being a super warrior, that it gave him special powers. Well, these special powers are coming into everything, and they're coming into, patent prior art studies really quickly. So some of these things are like automated insights. I do a patent prior art study and I build an AI to automatically give me all these insights I just mentioned, all of them: business, market, product, technology. Hit a button and it provides the insights. Actually, we're working on that tool. Another thing is it could automatically use the patent prior art to point out and look at your patent draft to point out how you should optimize it. Another thing that could happen is that you could have the patent prior art with AI show you, and you could ask it, now that I've understood the patent prior art, how can I improve my product? The AI can tell you that. You could do real-time competitive analysis with the AI, with the patent prior art. It could tell you these trends. You could do predictive patent filing. When you look at the patent prior art, you can ask it what will be the next patents. You can automatically manage your portfolio now, because you can now exhume all the patent prior art and have strategies around portfolio management and have the AI tell you how to implement that strategy with the patent prior art. I mean, this is today. This is not the future. We could do cross-industry innovation discovery, how I can take patent prior art from two industries. And by the way, there's a lot of secrets in the patent literature about how things are stored. They're cross-classified. So you may have a laser classified as a heating or cutting element, but you may also have a laser as something that gives you a reference or a pointing. So this is one laser, but it has two functions. And what you're seeing is the use of patent prior art to show you various cross-industry innovation discoveries and how to bring them together. So that laser, when you look at the patent prior art, the insights of the AI could say, now that I understand the laser can be a pointer, and now that I understand the laser can be a cutter, why don't I use the laser to find where to point and then turn out and use it to automatically cut? There's also things like patent licensing intelligence that comes from AI, that you can look at the patent prior art and really do a sort of first level of who might be potential licenses. And the same is true for litigation. Who might I be worried about? Getting back to regulation, you can do the exact same thing. You can use the patent prior art with AI to help determine what the standards are and whether or not you're meeting the standards, or is there a possibility using the patent prior art, looking at your potential patent to create a standard. And then finally, IP strategy just pops right out of this. You can dynamically create IP strategies by looking at the patent prior art using AI. So every one of these points I could do a podcast on and more. One of the things about AI is that it's heavily related to the corpus of information it has. The patent literature is the corpus of all the inventions over history. So that's got to be very useful for all sorts of use. So let's wrap up. In topic number one, we talked about what is a prior art study. We talked about things like novelty, patentability, claim refinement, freedom to operate studies, which of course is one of the direct uses. We talked about litigation defense and portfolio strengthening. We even talked about things like how you can extract from that opposition strategies and technology trends. And finally, we talked about things like how I can use the patent prior art for things like patent licensing and valuation. But then we moved on to topic number two, talking about the business uses for patent prior art. Here we talked about business risk, business strength, how to value your business, how to find the novelty positioning of your business. We talked about being a first mover. We talked about things like understanding the business competitive landscape. We even talked about it as helping you with your investment strategy. Even businesses that are looking for operational efficiency, we talked about uses thereof. We also talked about things like partnership and growth planning. So there's a lot of uses for the patent prior art for business. And then in topic number three, we shift to the market uses for patent prior art studies. Here we talked about various things which might seem pretty obvious, things like market competitors, but then we talked about some subtle things like drivers and benefits and things like potential customers that come out of this. We talked about the citations and how that's used for a wonderful way of finding potential partners or M&A or even customers. We talked about claim types and barrier for entry. We talked about how to do licensing and partnership. And we even talked about how this white space analysis can be used to find gaps. And finally, we talked about in the market how we can find market maturity by seeing how mature the market is by looking at the patent prior art over time. In topic number 4, we talked about the product uses for patent prior art, things like the product drivers and product improvements, how it's integrated. And we talked about the difference between integration and convergence. We talked about product leverage points. We talked about the future trends of the product from the patent prior art. We even talked about people using the patent prior art to understand cost reduction strategies. Of course, product enhancements to see what everybody else is doing. And we even talked about regulatory and things like product lifecycle. So there's a lot in the product area that the patent prior art helps with. And then we moved on to topic number 5, which is the technology uses for the patent prior art. Clearly, the patent prior art is designed to look at technology differences. And that's what we talked about, technology variations or projecting technology by looking at the patent prior art. We talked about seeing improvements. We talked about the layering, shows how it builds on. We talked about technology gaps. We talked about convergence. And we even talked about things like scalability and things like integration and standardization. So there's a lot to the technology. And then finally, we ended up the fun part talking about the uses of the patent prior art. Things like automated insights, right? Or patent draft optimization, having it write the patent draft. How you can ask it to tell you what the product improvement should be by studying the patent prior art. We talked about real-time competitive analysis, predictive patent filing, how you can manage your portfolio. We even talked about how you can use cross-industry, understandings and how to combine things. And obviously, you can use it for patent licensing or patent litigation and things like understanding regulatory checks, even coming down to dynamic IP strategy definitions. And as I mentioned, some of these things I'm working on right now and others are, but this is happening now. Given the corpus of information of all the millions of patents that have all the inventions in the world in them, what a wonderful way to have AI, which loves to read a corpus of information, extracting things from it. Every one of these things we talked about, the prior art study itself, the business, the market, the product, the technology, all can be extracted now using AI. And remember, if you like this, please subscribe, and then also come join us at our blog, Invent Anything, and listen to our new series, Inventors at Work. This is John Cronin, Invent Anything.